Hugh Grant is now playing an Oompa Loompa. So I guess, Hugh Grant, you're now identifying as a little person.
Disney's done it again, but this time they crossed a line they can't uncross. The studio that once brought magic to life is now dealing with a PR disaster of epic proportions. Forget fairy tales. This is one controversy they weren't ready for. It all started when Disney decided to remake Snow White, and instead of the iconic 7 dwarfs, they went with a completely different approach. First, they replaced the dwarfs with average height people, and then added animated characters. People weren't just confused, they were furious. The real storm began when Peter Dinklage, best known for playing Tyrion Lannister in Game of Thrones and also a vocal advocate for people with dwarfism, took a bold stance against Disney's live-action Snow White remake.
But you're still making that f***ing backward story of 7 dwarves living in a cave. What the f***?
In a 2022 podcast interview, Dinklage didn't hold back. He called the story fucking backwards and pointed out the irony in Disney celebrating their so-called progressiveness by casting a Latina actress as Snow White, while still telling a tale that centered around a group of dwarfs living in a cave. His point wasn't just about representation, it was about how Hollywood continues to cling to old stereotypes even when pretending to be forward-thinking. This instantly made headlines and set the tone for a wave of controversy. Disney, once seen as the gold standard in magical storytelling, now found itself being called out by one of the most high-profile actors with dwarfism in the world. Caught off guard but trying not to look like it, Disney released a statement soon after Dinklage's comments went viral. They claimed they were already doing things differently with the portrayal of the 7 dwarfs. According to them, they had been consulting with members of the dwarfism community to make sure they weren't reinforcing outdated stereotypes. The idea was to reimagine the characters in a more modern, sensitive way. On paper, this sounded like a responsible move. But the statement was vague, offering no real details, and it came off as a bit of damage control. Critics and fans were skeptical. Was this genuine effort or just corporate PR trying to sweep a big issue under the rug? And then things got even more complicated. Dinklage's comments had triggered a major debate, but not everyone in the dwarfism community agreed with him. Several actors with dwarfism, including Dylan Postal, better known as WWE's Hornswoggle, Katrina Kemp, and Jeff Brooks, publicly pushed back. They weren't just disagreeing, they were angry. To them, Dinklage wasn't just expressing an opinion, he was speaking on their behalf without asking.
There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her. Weird. Super weird. So we didn't do that this time.
Worse, they felt he was potentially taking jobs away. Hollywood offers very few roles to actors with dwarfism, and the 7 dwarfs were iconic, visible roles that could offer real work and visibility. Postal even said Dinklage was creating a narrative that being a dwarf in Snow White was shameful, when for him it was a celebration of identity. The community, which Disney said it was trying to uplift, was now deeply divided. Fast forward to July 2023, and the situation hit another boiling point. Paparazzi photos from the film's set in Berkshire, UK started leaking online. These images revealed what looked like the new version of the 7 dwarfs, and the internet wasn't ready. There were 7 characters, but only 1 actor with dwarfism. The rest were average height actors of various races and genders, and the mix left people scratching their heads. Was this Disney's idea of reimagining? The characters didn't look anything like the dwarfs from the 1937 classic. At first, Disney tried to downplay the photos, even suggesting they weren't from the actual production. But once the images spread like wildfire, they eventually admitted that yes, the photos were real, but those were stand-ins, not the final cast. That didn't do much to cool things down. Once Disney confirmed the authenticity of the photos, they hoped the clarification would calm the backlash, but it only fueled more frustration. People on all sides were unhappy. On one hand, many fans of the original film felt like the studio was messing too much with the beloved classic. On the other, the dwarfism community was once again asking why only 1 actor with dwarfism had been cast. If Disney truly wanted to avoid stereotypes, why not create richer, more developed characters for actors with dwarfism instead of erasing them entirely? The backlash now wasn't just about political correctness, it was about hypocrisy. Disney said it was trying to be inclusive, but many felt it had done the opposite. Then came another blow. Jason Weeman Acuna, star of Jackass, added his voice to the conversation, and he didn't sugarcoat it. In interviews, he flat out accused Disney of taking away roles that should belong to little people. He echoed what others had been saying for months. These were jobs, plain and simple. He asked why. In a movie called Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs,
that it's no longer 1937, and we absolutely wrote a Snow White that is
not going to be saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about...
Disney had decided to hire Snow White and the Seven Average People. His comments hit hard because they came from someone who has built a successful career while embracing his identity. Acuña's frustration spoke to a much deeper issue of erasure in Hollywood. In an attempt to turn the tide, Disney revealed the official look of the Dwarfs in October 2023, and they were fully CGI.
$200 billion in the last 4 years. $200 billion.
$200 billion
in the last 4 years.
I mean, I'm not surprised.
200 billion. And by the way, 200 billion.
Gone were the live-action actors. Instead, the new Dwarfs looked a lot like their animated 1937 counterparts, just rendered with modern visual effects. But this decision opened another can of worms. Disney avoided calling them dwarfs entirely in promotional material or movie dialogue. They were only referred to by their names: Doc, Grumpy, Dopey, Happy, Bashful, Sleepy, and Sneezy. For some, this felt like a decent middle ground. For others, it felt like cowardice. Disney seemed more interested in dodging backlash than actually addressing any of the concerns. Rachel Zegler, the young actress cast as the new Snow White, had already sparked some controversy when she first spoke about the original 1937 film, calling it outdated and problematic. But it wasn't until she doubled down in later interviews that things truly exploded. In various press events and behind-the-scenes clips that resurfaced in 2023 and 2024, Zegler seemed to take every opportunity to distance herself
from the original decisions with regard to casting to the insane, hardcore, nasty leftism of Rachel Zegler attacking her own co-star for being Israeli, and generally attacking men and suggesting that Snow White was a sexist story and all this. Controversy has been dogging this movie since the very beginning.
And this new version of Snow White from the character's original arc. She said the prince was essentially a stalker, that the romance was forced, and that her Snow White wasn't going to wait around to be saved by some man. These weren't just passing comments, they were strong statements delivered with a sense of righteousness that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. For many fans of the original, it came off not as modern empowerment, but as open mockery of a beloved fairy tale. What might have been seen as an opportunity to respectfully update a classic had now become a lecture, and Zegler was the one giving it. Clips of her interviews were chopped up, meme-ified, mocked, and spread all over social media. A growing number of fans, even those previously open to a reimagining, began turning against her. The narrative quickly morphed into a broader debate about feminism and what it actually means in modern media. Zegler's Snow White was described as a strong, independent woman who didn't need a man to define her story, but critics began asking whether this shift was truly empowering or just performative. Instead of showing growth, love, and resilience, qualities the original character embodied, this new version seemed built entirely to defy romance and tradition for the sake of it. It was as if femininity itself had become the villain. The prince, a key part of the original tale, had been reduced to little more than a side character. Some felt the new film was trying too hard to prove a point, and in doing so, had lost the heart of the original story. The pushback wasn't limited to just conservative viewers either. Even some progressive voices and feminists began to critique the movie's tone, saying that the strongest stories about women don't have to come at the expense of softness, love, or even the occasional fairy tale ending. What started as a creative update had started feeling like a rejection of everything that made the story magical. Things took an even more dramatic turn when someone with deep personal ties to the original film finally spoke up.
The amount of, like, if it ain't broken, don't fix it. Leave it the alone. Yeah, that's if it ain't broke, break it. Like, leave these stories alone. By the way, if she never opened her mouth and she didn't do all this nonsense, people would have gone and watched the movie. They would have made their money, but then people would have been disappointed after.
David Hand, the son of the man who co-directed the 1937 animated classic, also named David Hand. In interviews, he didn't mince words. He said Disney's new take was a complete disgrace, that it dishonored the original vision, and that Walt Disney himself would be rolling in his grave. Coming from the family of one of the original creators, this hit like a gut punch. The criticism wasn't coming from internet trolls or anonymous YouTube critics, it was coming from legacy. It gave weight to what fans had been saying all along, that Disney was not simply updating a fairy tale, but dismantling it in the name of modern trends. The legacy criticism created a powerful juxtaposition between old Disney magic built on timeless storytelling and the new Disney model, increasingly defined by controversy, corporate strategy, and ideological messaging. Then came a twist no one quite saw coming. Conservative media company The Daily Wire decided to get in on the action. They announced their own competing version of Snow White, titled Snow White and the Evil Queen, casting political commentator and actress Brett Cooper in the lead role. This wasn't just a movie, it was a statement. The project was clearly designed as a direct counterpoint to Disney's reimagining, promising to preserve traditional values and stick to the fairy tale roots. It stirred up a lot of interest on the right and made headlines as an ideological showdown in the culture war.
You come out and the freedom of speech was to condemn the very thing that you're paid to build? Are you kidding?
But the buzz didn't last. Just a few months later, in December 2024, Cooper left the Daily Wire altogether. With her departure, the project seemed to vanish overnight. No more trailers, no new updates, just silence. Whether it was cancelled or indefinitely shelved, no one knew, but the moment had passed. The conservative version that could have reignited the fairy tale war simply faded out of the conversation. By late 2024, the criticism directed at Zegler had reached a fever pitch. Her old clips were being recycled daily by angry fans, and every new statement seemed to make things worse. Finally, she tried to walk some of it back. In an October interview with Variety, she expressed regret that her past comments had come off the way they did. She said it broke her heart that people thought she didn't respect the original, and admitted that the new film did contain a love story, despite her earlier claims. She even acknowledged that some of her joking interviews may have come across as too flippant. It was a soft, slightly vague apology, more of a rephrasing than a full admission. For some, it was enough. For many others, it felt like too little, too late. The internet's memory is long, and Zegler's previous words had already cemented her image in the public eye. The damage had been done, and this attempt at reconciliation didn't exactly put out the fire. As if the controversies around the film weren't enough, things got political in a way that took the whole situation to another level. After the teaser dropped in August 2024, pro-Palestinian activist groups including BDS and PACBI began calling for a boycott of the film.
I never want it to come off as me being ungrateful for the opportunities I have. I can also be having the greatest time and simultaneously wishing people would stop sending me death.
Not because of Zegler, but because of Gal Gadot, who was playing the evil queen. The issue? Gadot's well-known support for the Israeli military, having served herself and spoken in favor of the Israeli government during the 2021 and 2024 Gaza conflicts. Then, to complicate things further, Zegler voiced support for Palestine, putting the two leads of the film on very opposite sides of an extremely sensitive global issue. While there was no public feud between Zegler and Gadot, the political tension around the film became impossible to ignore. Gadot even received death threats and reportedly required additional security at press events, but the political heat wasn't done yet. After Donald Trump lost the 2024 US presidential election, Zegler tweeted out, "F Donald Trump," and followed it up by saying she hoped his supporters never know peace. That tweet went viral, and not in a good way. Conservative fans, already wary of the film, erupted. Calls to boycott the film weren't just about politics anymore, they became deeply personal, aimed at Zegler herself. Disney suddenly found itself with a star being cheered by one half of the country and despised by the other. By the time the film finally hit theaters in March 2025, it felt less like a movie release and more like the conclusion of a cultural saga. The controversies, the political landmines, the interviews, the leaks, all of it had built up so much anticipation and drama that the movie itself almost became an afterthought, and when it finally arrived, it didn't exactly land with a bang. Despite topping the box office in its opening weekend, it quickly fizzled. As of April 9, 2025, the film had grossed just over $170 million globally, a fraction of the reported $500 million Disney needed to break even. The reviews were lukewarm to harsh. Critics praised Zegler's singing and Gadot's performance, but slammed the writing, tone, and pacing. Rotten Tomatoes gave it a disappointing 40%, Metacritic hovered around 50, and audiences graded it a plain B+ on CinemaScore. Worst of all, the movie didn't seem to know what it wanted to be. It tried to stay faithful while also reinventing, tried to empower while also playing it safe, and in doing so, it pleased almost no one. The film had become less about Snow White and more about everything else: identity politics, representation, online outrage, brand identity, and cultural division. Disney had tried to cast a modern spell on an old classic, but in the end all they summoned was a storm they couldn't control.